I'm delighted this morning to welcome our opening keynote speaker, Kerry Morrison, who led the Hollywood Business Improvement District for 22 years before founding Heart Forward LA. Her organization's mission is to provide them, transform the American mental health system through radical hospitality. Kerry, we're looking forward to your presentation.
Hello, everybody. Oh, someone was in Toastmasters. They learned you got to keep clapping till the person gets to the. So great. You know, like this is the first conference I've been in for 2 years where I'm actually wearing shoes. Because usually there's a yellow box around my face. I guess I should be in front of the microphone. And how many of you have been on Zoom meetings where you're barefoot and, I'm so glad to be here today and so excited to be able to talk about a topic and maybe present a slightly different view. Because today I want to talk about our mental health system and mental illness as a cohort of our homeless population. And I'm going to tee up this video that someone made this summer. It was amazing, spending 2 days with a film crew, and they condensed it to 5 minutes, which is awesome how they do that. This will just give you a little glimpse into who I am, a person who ran a business organization in Hollywood for 22 years, but was so heartbroken by the people suffering from serious mental illness on the streets of Hollywood that I eventually, after receiving a wonderful fellowship from the Durfee Foundation to explore better ways to help people with mental illness, I gave my board of directors 2 years ago 6 months to find my replacement because I felt called actually to work in this space full time. So this is a 5-minute view. I want you to just pay attention to the one gentleman, Tori, who you will see in this video, because I'm going to talk a little bit about him as well. So take it away. People often ask me, how do I engage someone that I see on the street? This is on Hollywood Boulevard, the Walk of Fame. In my job managing the Business Improvement District in Hollywood, I was responsible for keeping my little corner of Hollywood safe and clean. The situation involving people with homelessness was increasingly visible in the community. My board of directors, which is a business board, were really flummoxed and like, how do we deal with this? This is not good for business. So I started to kind of like reach out and figure out who was doing what, who could help in this respect. I felt then kind of called to not walk just past people and ignore people and to kind of lean into their humanity. And there was this one particular guy, he was very intimidating, was very scary actually. You know, clearly very mentally ill. He would always just be rocking back and forth on the bench. It took about 4 days, and finally I got his name. His name was Tori. I didn't understand why someone could sit on a bus bench for 7-8 months and nobody would help him. In my 12-13 year relationship with Tori, I have seen virtually every aspect of our mental health system. There is no defined progression toward healing and recovery. That's what I learned through Tori, is that he's taken his meds, he's clean, he's eating, and they release him because he has been stabilized. But he is not on any kind of path toward recovering his life. So I had the amazing opportunity in 2016 and 17 to do a deeper dive into who does this better. And I made my way to this city that really no one has ever heard of, Triass, Italy. The posture of their mental health system is one of what they would call Acclienza, which is the Italian word for hospitality. And hospitality means you are welcome here, you are safe, we see you, your voice matters. So instead of approaching folks on a clinical basis, a greater emphasis is placed on capturing that person's life story and, most importantly, their life aspirations. What do you want to do? How can we help you with your life plans? It then approaches people and not as their diagnosis, which is something that has to be treated. After I'd been to Triass and seen it, I could not shake it. I could not ignore it. I left my job of 22 years and I stepped out to tell the story. Formed as a nonprofit, looked for ways that I could model what radical hospitality might look like in an American context. So that is what Heart Forward is all about. Lean with your heart. What I'm trying to do with Heart Forward is to model radical hospitality in 3 permanent supportive housing communities that I've been assigned to. We were asking them, what do you want to do as a community? In the case of Villas at Gower, we used a community garden as the catalyst for that. It has been really life-giving to see people who otherwise would not have been gathering together, starting to help each other with watering, help each other with harvesting. I keep telling the story of Triass, and I keep trying to impress upon people, we don't need to spend more money, we don't need more bureaucracy, we need to peel away all the things that are creating impediments to how we treat people and allowing like human kindness to come through. I don't think this change is going to happen overnight, which is why I think it is a generational change and that we're at the beginning of a forward movement. I won't see big change probably in my lifetime, but I feel like there is a shift happening that gives me hope. I get asked all the time, how can I help? I think the pivotal moment for me was when I conquered my fear to sit down and ask Tori his name. We all can think of people right now in your community that you see that seem to be completely isolated. You can actually become that person's advocate. Think about it. I can't think of any other segment of our society who has less of a voice than people with serious mental illness. We have to be their voice. Conquer that fear and get the name. Two days. I have great appreciation for people who do filming and how they do editing, but they did a wonderful job of capturing the elements of the story. So if we can put the PowerPoint up. Today, what I want to do in the short time that I have, and I'm really also very open to having a dialogue with you, is posit something. I want to make 2 kind of provocative comments, and then I want to tell you a little bit more about Triass. So, next slide, please. The word homeless is just too broad a word for what it is that we are encountering in our society right now. It's an old word. It is a label, it is a big tent label under which there are multiple cohorts of people who find themselves in this state. You just heard from the woman from Pierce College, college students, couch surfing, living in a car. That is far different than people with serious mental illness who are huddled in a doorway. And the way people enter that big tent label of homelessness is different, and the way they're going to exit that tent is different. So even for my friend Wendy Gruhl here, who's on the Homeless Services Authority, there's a lot of things that they don't have control over under that homelessness word. So I want to kind of just put that out there to begin with. In a sense, if we are only kind of talking about housing to solve homelessness, then our ladder is against the wrong wall. And we're going to scale that ladder and leave behind a whole cohort of people who need something much more intensive. So next slide. I'm going to present 3 things to you today. First of all, we do not have a mental health system in this country. We just don't. And again, if anyone wants to argue with me, I'll take you on. We do not have a mental health system in this country. And for those of you, and I know Latina's going to be here today, if you work in the LA County mental health system, it's like you have your finger in a dike because the water keeps coming at you. So this is an LA County issue, a state of California issue, and an American issue. Second, housing first, which is the federal government policy to move people into housing first, from the street to housing. This does not work for people who have very, very high needs for care and treatment. And then finally, others have succeeded where we have failed. We are not the leading bleeding edge on how to help and treat people with mental illness. And I'm going to share how and why we should listen to the lessons from another country. So let's start with the mental health system. If we can move to, we can take the next slide. What is a system? Like, a system is, next slide please, a system is a network of interconnecting pieces, elements, actors that actually helps to move something through. It's an interconnected network. So I today left my house near Hollywood and I got on the freeway system. There was an on-ramp, there was a road, there was an off-ramp, right? The freeway system. Can you imagine if suddenly Winnetka was shut down and I couldn't have gotten here today, and if that was something that you encountered all the time? Think of your circulatory system. The blood is moving through your body, nourishing your brain, helping with digestion, keeping things moving. What if there were holes in our circulatory system, our digestive system? So when you think about that context, I would posit we do not have a mental health system. I have yet to meet a person, a parent, a peer, a person with lived experience, or any professional that would say that if you enter the system, you are going to be cared for and taken care of and not drop through the cracks for the rest of your life. Or how about even for a month, right? Recently, Dr. Tom Insel, who used to be the head of the National Institute of Mental Health, and he was Governor Newsom's advisor on mental health, and took him to Triass with me in 2019, which you'll hear more about in a minute. He was interviewed by NAMI, Santa Clara County, with respect to the mental health system, and he says, what we might need to do is to reinvent an entire new system for mental health needs in the 21st century. The failure has been in the delivery. The country has operated in crisis mode. The result, we don't have a healthcare system. He's referring to a mental health care system. We have a sick care system, all built around crisis, the most expensive, intensive care form of healthcare. So what is the opposite of a system? Disorder, confusion, and we see that on the street. So I'm sure many of you, next slide, saw the article in Sunday's LA Times. We've been waiting for this for several months, and several of you know our good friend Sarah Dussault, former chair of LASA, very, very much involved in local government and political circles in Los Angeles. And this article, if you haven't read it, you need to read it. Doug Smith did an excellent job of doing a deep dive into her brother's life, who is suffering from schizophrenia and is now in jail, has the potential to go to prison, and is a one case study of thousands that could be written in LA County of a person who has dropped through the cracks over and over and over again. So everything about our system was revealed in John's story. He is not accountable to any person. There's no one person who has been assigned his case. Sarah was constantly getting text messages or trying to work favors to help him, but there is no one in our government health system that is assigned his responsible kind of trajectory forward to be cared for. There's no attempt to contact the families. You'll hear when I talk about Italy, they can't believe that we don't involve families in these decisions. And we found this in Hollywood when we would, Tori, for example, when we were working with Tori, we tried to figure out where is your family? Families are often desperately worried about their loved ones, or they could help, or they could help pay for things. I mean, yes, sometimes family relationships are toxic, but also often they can be supportive. And our system marginalizes families because of privacy rules and other reasons. There is no expectation in the American system that a person can actually recover their life and pursue their career. This talks about how John wanted to be a model. You know, he wanted to finish college. We don't think or expect that a person who is diagnosed with mental illness, 18, 19, is actually going to be able to finish college and have a job and have a family. This is absolutely insane. We have abandoned a whole cohort of our brothers and sisters to a life of misery because we don't believe that is possible. There is no long-term commitment to recovery in our system. And if any of you have ever, seen someone picked up on a so-called 5150 hold, taken to the hospital where they're supposed to be seen and treated for 72 hours, I can't tell you how many times in Hollywood we would see someone back out on the street that same afternoon, still with their hospital bracelet on, or maybe a day later, because the way our system is funded is a person is stabilized, they're given some meds, and then they're released. And that is just the beginning of the recovery journey, right? There is no access to treatment beds when needed. I'll talk about in a few moments here that we have an absolute shortage at every step of the psychiatric continuum of care, from the emergency room to what ultimately would be a high level of supportive living. So the shortage of treatment beds is the reason why you see people wandering barefoot down the street. There is nowhere for them to go. And finally, the only guaranteed beds are jail beds. Those are the beds that ultimately, we've got 5,000 people in LA County Jail with mental illness. So next slide. Housing First is the federal government policy for addressing homelessness. And government is slow to change and perhaps slow to recognize where it needs to modify some things. This is where we have seen the shift in the last 10 years or so away from funding shelter and short-term transitional housing to permanent housing, permanent supportive housing. So next slide. So in the old days, like maybe prior to 2010-ish, you actually would think about somebody going into a shelter, going into transitional housing, but now the pathway is from homelessness into permanent housing, which is why, and I thought it was interesting in the Times poll in the last 2 days that was issued, where the public is growing weary of this commitment. The public is saying, look, this is inhumane to leave people on the streets because we don't have enough permanent housing for them. So pallet shelters, I love pallet shelters. I would live in a pallet shelter in a New York minute if there was an earthquake and my house, was, they're like, let's have them everywhere. They are dignified, they are clean, they are warm, they create a sense of community. And for people to suggest that, well, we're just going to wait another 5 years to finish all the PSH that we're building in LA County, in LA City is building it. I'm on the Triple H committee. That is a recipe for human misery. So next slide. I'm just going to posit that on the bell curve of homelessness, so as I mentioned to you before, there's this kind of distribution of people who are homeless, from our couch surfers over here on the left to the seriously mentally ill on the right. I'm going to posit that if we would just recognize that 2% of our homeless population cannot make it in permanent supportive housing, they need a higher level of care. My friend Tori, who you saw in the video, lives in a board and care home. He would not be able to purchase his groceries, manage his money, boil top ramen, do his laundry in permanent supportive housing. He needs to live in a board and care home. This type of housing is shrinking and is inadequate, but I would argue is a type of housing that we need to seriously evaluate and investigate as a viable option for people who have high needs for treatment. These are the homeless count numbers, 66,000 for LA County and 41,000 for LA City. So I'm just saying, let's set aside 825 special treatment beds, in my view, in a congregate living, family-style house or apartment or mini campus for people in LA City, 1,328 in LA County. I guarantee you they do not exist. Next slide. So, the housing that we have committed to, and I think it's a good thing, is permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing does require a level of independent living. Managing your money, doing your laundry, buying your groceries, cooking your food, keeping your house clean. This is Path Metro Villas, funded by Triple H, where right now Heart Forward is doing a radical hospitality initiative. So yes, Tori and so many others would never be able to survive in permanent supportive housing. Next slide. What we are left with is our adult residential facility system. These are not addressed by LAHSA. They're not funded by local sources. They are funded by the people who live there. So for example, in a board and care home, which could either be something as small as a 5-bedroom home that people have opened up their home to rent beds to people, to a larger facility. The one that Tori lives in has 65 beds. The way it works is that if you have a Social Security disability check of $1,200 or so, you pay $35 a day for your rent. Now, who in this room thinks that you could, on $35 a day, provide 3 meals a day, 2 snacks, manage the medications, do the laundry, keep the place safe and clean? Who's in on that business model? All right, this is why they are closing at a fast clip. Next slide. LA County, to their credit, has been opening up their eyes to this crisis, as has the state. This has really only kind of come on everyone's radar in the last couple of years. The county found in July 2020, when they released a report, that 51 board and care homes had closed in the county in the last 4 years, eliminating over 1,300 beds. More have closed in the subsequent year, which I don't have the number for. Every bed lost is a precious bed loss. And every one of these facilities that close is, you got to reconsider the NIMBY fight again to get something opened again. It is lost opportunity. When you think about the $35 a day rent in a board and care, let's compare that to $1,000 a day in an acute hospital setting, or $645 a day to be jailed in LA County Jail. It mentioned in the article that John, in the journey that he's been on, spent 400 days in LA County Jail in the past several years, which amounts to over $250,000 that the taxpayers are paying for his care. Yet we cannot seem to invest in housing that actually has the potential to stabilize people. So, moving on. Reason to hope. Even today as I was driving here, I thought, how are we ever going to pull off change in this country? That's why I say in the video that I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, because there has to be such fundamental system change in the United States to address our mental health system. It's hard to imagine even where to start. But what I like to tell the story is that I have seen a place where they do it right, and you can't stop thinking about it. You just can't shake it from your mind. So next slide here. Going back to Tori was probably the scariest guy on Hollywood Boulevard. And that was 8 months later, after Tori had been, we got a team around him. He had been placed in a hospital. He was treated. He was on a medication regime. He was placed into housing by a philanthropist. You can see the difference. It was almost like he had come out of a cocoon. We could find out where his family was. We could find out where he went to school. And a few days after that remarkable picture was taken, he stopped taking his meds and he fell into the abyss again. And so he has fallen into the abyss multiple times. But just even seeing Tori like a butterfly coming out of a chrysalis was my first harbinger that there is hope for people. Next slide. So, when I was awarded the Stanford Fellowship they gave me 2 years to do anything, explore how it is or where it is that they're doing this better. I didn't know where that fellowship would lead me. You stay in your job and they give you time and funds to explore. And they sent me, as I went to the awards ceremony for the Stanton Fellowship, they said you have 3 minutes to describe to the audience what your inquiry is going to be. And my inquiry was, why is it so hard to help the most severely mentally ill people get off the streets? So I stopped at Staples on the way and I picked up a rubber band ball. I thought, well, this is the only way I can describe what I'm going to try to do. And my premise was that there's a person inside this rubber band ball. And this rubber band ball is all the rules and procedures and liability and HIPAA and union considerations and reasons why we cannot help the person on the inside of this rubber band ball. And that was my inquiry. So where did it take me? Next slide. I was told that it would be worth visiting a place in Italy called Triass, which so many people have not heard of. It's 30 miles south of the Slovenian border. It is a place where the World Health Organization has declared it the global best practice for how people are treated in a community care setting. So when they closed their asylum in 1980, they actually created the community system of care that we were supposed to create in the United States, and we did not. In that city of 230,000 people, which is about the size of Modesto-ish, imagine this. They have 6 psych beds in their central hospital in an unlocked ward with no restraints. They view the use of restraints as torture. You can walk in and out of that psych ward. It doesn't look like a psych ward. It looks like just like a motel room. No one's wearing uniforms. It's not a clinical setting. And all the times that I have visited this psych ward, it's never been full. So how do you do that? The reason and the way they do it is that they have divided their city into 4 quadrants. And each quadrant has a community mental health center open 24/7. And each community mental health center has an additional 6 beds for crisis response. Now, they don't let people get as sick in Italy as we let them get sick here. We let people, as Dr. Insel said, we are a crisis system. People get so sick here, we couldn't possibly pull this off now, maybe in a generation. But you can walk into that clinic anytime. You can talk to a psychiatrist anytime. You don't have to have an appointment. It is not a place, it doesn't feel like a foreboding place. If you walk into the mental health clinic on Vine Street in Hollywood, it looks like an armed bunker in Syria, frankly, and you are immediately greeted by 2 armed guards who are going to search your briefcase, and then you walk up to bulletproof glass for your appointment. You're on edge before you've even started the process. I'm on edge just as a showing up for a meeting. It's a radically different system, but it has contributed to integration of people into the community, the ability to tackle their needs immediately. Next slide. You know, Franco Basaglia was a psychiatrist. He was kind of a rebel psychiatrist in the 60s and the 70s, and it was his vision that imagined creating the community system of care that Triass was able to so beautifully play out. He said, the asylum does not serve to cure mental illness, but only to destroy the patient. And what I thought was interesting, we brought several psychiatrists and staff from Triass to Los Angeles in 2018 to see our system. We took them to Skid Row. We took them to LA County Jail, where people are chained to furniture. We took them to LA County UCLA psych ward, where people are restrained on beds. We took them to locked facilities that you can't even imagine how harrowing it would be to live there with no access to sunlight or grass. It was the most shameful week of my life to be walking these people through our system and to show them how people are treated. And I remember when we met with Sheila Kuehl, Dr. Mazzina, in his very direct way, as he processed having been in Skid Row, he said, "You may think you closed the asylum in America, but we just walked through an open air asylum." And I love the fact that Dr. Sharon, who obviously has been a champion of change, he in the article that he was quoted in on November 18th, talking about the revolving door of people, streets, jail, streets, jail, streets, jail. He said the bottom line is that the mental health systems in this country and in this state and in this county are completely inadequate. Dr. John Sharon, LA County Director of Mental Health. We have what I call the open air asylum of the street and the closed air asylum of the jail. So that is what we have, folks. That is what we have to offer people. Next page. So when I went to Triass the first time, watching my time, I'll try to wrap this up pretty quickly. This was the psychiatrist who took me around. You can see he doesn't look like a psychiatrist. This is the center. There's no kind of accoutrements of being in a clinical setting. It doesn't feel clinical. They are a non-clinical model. Next slide. I took a group of people from LA County back with me to see it in the fall of 2017, including Dr. Sharon and Judge Bianco from the Mental Health Court and Jackie Lacey, Center Mental Health Deputy, and we had someone from the LA County Jail and the LAPD and the sheriff and a philanthropist. I wanted them to see it, and I was hoping that they would be as touched as I was, and they were. It's staggering just to kind of move through the city and see the various ways in which people stay connected to the community. Next slide. So very quickly, what are kind of the underpinning guiding principles of the Triass system? One is that social recovery is critical. We isolate people in America. They're lonely and isolated. There they believe that human connection is therapeutic, and it is much more impactful than psychiatric interventions. So kinship, family, friends, and pets matter. Do not marginalize family and friends. That is what we do in America. Purposeful life, this is my favorite part. They believe you have a human right to a sense of purpose in your life. We all woke up this morning and we had the purpose to come here and to learn something. If you did not have a purpose in life, can you imagine how debilitating that would be? So they actually create, throughout their community, opportunities for people to work and to learn and to work at jobs as minimal or as maximal as possible, because that is so integral to a person's well-being. Radical hospitality, which is the thing that I've embraced. What does that mean? You are welcome here. You are safe. You are seen. We hear you. Your voice matters. They believe in the horizontal relationship. The clinician in America is here, or your dentist is here, right? This is what you need, a root canal. But they believe in horizontal relationships, where the clinician is not necessarily here to tell you, this is what I think you need for your bipolar disorder. They will actually say, who are you? Where did you come from? What are your dreams in life? How do we help you get there? Let's work on a plan. Let's work on a plan to achieve your life aspirations. System accountability. You will not be left to figure out this system alone, like John, who can't even have his sister help him. We will catch you if you fall. You will be served by familiar faces who won't leave you. And finally, whole person care. You are not your diagnosis. We will support you in your life plans and in your daily needs. Next slide. So, when I came back, I've been there 5 times now, but when I came back the 4th time, I just felt like I've seen this. We can do this. We can do this. It may take a while for us to do this on a system, American system level, but we can do this in our nonprofits. We can do this in the pallet shelter community. We can do this. We can create bright spots of radical hospitality, even in Los Angeles, as we start to model this different posture. So I told my board of directors, I've given you 6 months notice. Find someone else to run Hollywood. I cannot reconcile the cranes in the air symbolizing all the economic prosperity that is happening. And meanwhile, on the Walk of Fame, this is what I have to walk past, and I have no clue how to help this guy. Next slide. So Acclienza, that is the word, that's the Italian word for hospitality. That's the title of my blog. And let me just move on to the last thing, and then we'll take some questions. What can you do? Next slide. Couple thoughts I had. One is, find your voice. The reason I have a voice is because I have actually sat with people like Tori and others. So if people say, oh, well, the system works in such and such a way, I say, no, it doesn't. Like, I've seen it. It doesn't work because this is what happened to this guy. So if you have the ability to make a commitment to come alongside one person and kind of engage in their story, I encourage you to do that. Arm yourself with enough information to ask good questions. So today I just said, Kerry Morrison says that there is no mental health system in America. Go ask that question. Ask that question. I'd love to have someone say that there is or that it's working. Keep asking those questions because our elected officials now who are tackling homelessness need to pivot from the housing-only solution to something that is actually more complicated, and we know it's playing out on our streets right now. Read up on this issue. It is really complicated. If I could tell you right now, oh, we need to do A, B, and C to fix this, I don't know exactly what we need to do to fix it. There's Medicaid rules, there's, we have made this, right? So read up on it, become informed. I'm happy to give you like the 3 best books that you should start to read if you want to at least be able to enter into the conversation. Realize that people with serious mental illness have no voice. They have no voice. They are not writing newsletters or blogs or marching anywhere. They have no voice. We have an obligation to help be their voice. Don't accept the status quo. The greatest concern is that we're like the frogs in hot water, like walking past that guy on the Walk of Fame. I don't know what I can do to help. I guess it's just the way it's going to be. Like, someone's going to figure this out. Wendy Gruhl is going to figure this out. The new mayor is going to figure this out. The new supervisor is going to figure this out. No. We have got to figure this out, and we have got to work together to figure this out. And finally, we need data. When you don't have data, then you don't know what you're trying to achieve. How many beds do we need at the highest acuity level of care for people like Tori who cannot cook their own top ramen? No one has identified that number. Nobody has costed it out. Nobody has talked about who should pay for it. We need data. The report that was referenced earlier in the slides that was just issued by a Coro fellow laid out a whole bunch of things that we need to collect data on that probably the state of California should direct so that we actually know how to get our arms around this, this need for very special housing and treatment for people with serious mental illness. So last slide, how do you get in touch with me? I have a podcast because I feel it's my job to help educate people, lay people about this. I invite you to listen to it. Heart Forward LA is the general website for the mission of my very, very humble, tiny, teensy nonprofit. And then Acclienza is my blog where I just pontificate on these topics. So thank you. Thank you for bearing with me.
Okay, just a word of instruction for our question and answer time. Because there may be some people in the room who have hearing issues, we encourage you to use the mic unless you have a really, really loud voice. And then if you do, kind of turn around to make sure that most of the people can hear you. And then maybe if needed, Kerry can repeat the question before you answer it.
Sure.
So, okay, so we have about 10 minutes to ask some questions.
Bill.
The question is, why can't we have public funds available to subsidize these that seem so important to the health care of these people in unemployment?
So the question is with respect to the ARS where people are paying their $35 a day, why can't we have subsidies? Great question, and there is beginning to be movement in that space. LA County in the past couple of years has incorporated what they call a patch. I think it's $25 to maybe $40 a day additional for people with high needs, but it's not a sustainable source of funding. There is growing awareness in the state of California that maybe money should be set aside to keep these places going. So that is a good pressure point, especially with the surplus that we have in our state budget right now, making a commitment to helping these board and care operators at least stay afloat. They will make far more money to sell their property to a developer than to keep the doors open for these people. So that is an excellent question.
I want to thank you for such a great presentation. How is it that the individual can make an impact and feel like they're making an impact? Because as you shared, it's pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. How can an individual make an impact? Yes. The screensaver on my computer is Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. The rock has not rolled back down yet, right? So the only thing I would say is that's why I gave you the 5 things to do. Find your voice. Find your voice. Find what it is that kind of like hits you at this level on this issue. And I'm happy to brainstorm with you on who you could join with, who you could come alongside with, where you might want to speak up. I think there is a shift. As I said here, I think there is movement. I understand the LA Times, I heard from a reporter, is going to start doing a much deeper dive on this issue because they recognize that it's something that people don't understand and needs light shed on it. So there's no coalition to join. There's no march to do yet. Help us make this into a movement. Okay, additional question.
You mentioned your fear. What fear did you have?
That's a great question. People say, how did you get so passionate about this issue? I have nobody in my family with mental illness. I've never had any real experience with it. And I just felt as Hollywood was improving, but the conditions were declining, I had to understand, like, who are these people? Where did you come from? So I was afraid. I was afraid to encounter people. And so, yeah, let me just share that very, very viscerally. When you see someone rocking back and forth on a bus bench, the way I met Tori was like, I thought, okay, who is this guy? Like, he's been there for months. He's got excrement all over him. Where does he go to the bathroom? There was always food placed around him, and you'll see this. There was water bottles or hamburgers or whatever. And the first time I sat down next to him, my heart was beating like in the Roger Rabbit, And I sat down and I said, hi, my name is Kerry. And he's rocking back and forth, and he looks at me, right? And my heart goes like this. And he couldn't believe someone was talking to him. So it didn't get very far that day. Went back the next day. It took me 4 days to get his name. And what I would tell you is that when you connect with someone with their name, something magical happens. So I came back the 4th time. I'm Kerry. What is your name? I'm Tori. And then it was like, wow, we just made a connection. So there's nothing to fear with Tori. He's scary because he was smelly, and it was hard to understand what was going on. And I began to be interested. We'd sit there, and he'd talk about how his whole family went to Guyana, and Jim Jones, and blah, 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 blah. And then he'd go by the Capitol Records building, and he was a very famous record producer, and then the FBI was over there, and all the things. And I don't know anything about schizophrenia. And I'm like, when I finally did found his sister, I said, did your family go to Guyana and with Jim Jones? Oh, no. It's like, okay. So it's a journey with another person. And he's been to my house for Thanksgiving, which is hard to imagine. So that's why I say conquer your fear, and really powerful things can happen.
All right. Thank you. Very powerful.